Number 10. Madalyn Davis. Madalyn Davis was only 21 years old when she fell to her death. The young British model was taking photographs on the top of a cliff in Australia, completely ignoring a barrier when the tragic incident happened. Madalyn was watching the sunrise over Diamond Bay, just east of Sydney, back in January of 2020, when she made a wrong move, lost her footing, and fell roughly 100 feet, 30 meters to the ground below. According to her mother, Rebecca Smith, it was all because her daughter had made one grave mistake. She had climbed over the safety fence so that she could get closer to the edge and take a more dramatic photograph, and that was what resulted in her early departure from this world. According to her mother, Madalyn had been struggling with her recently gained fame on social media. It all happened very quickly for her, and she was trying to get used to everything. Madalyn had traveled to Thailand, then Bali in Indonesia, just before she arrived in Australia, weeks before her death. She had the opportunity to live her dream, even if it was brief. Her mother also lashed out at people online who poked fun at Madalyn, saying she won a Darwin Award because she died for a selfie. Number 9. Between the Gap. A 37-year-old woman did not heed the barricades and was nearly crushed by a drawbridge. The cyclist was riding her bicycle in the town of Menasha, Wisconsin on July 4th, 2018. Her bizarre choice to ignore the barricades was captured on surveillance footage and posted online. After the video was uploaded, it had pretty much everyone in the country wondering what in the world was going through her mind. As the woman approached the drawbridge, it was pretty clear that the bridge was being raised. It was already moving up at an angle. The red and white barricades had come down to prevent traffic from driving onto the bridge, and there were bright red lights flashing in warning. Everything was screaming at this woman to stop. Still, she drove her bicycle through the barricades, continued directly towards the bridge, which at this point was obviously rising at a steep angle, and fell into the gap. This was the gap between the raised part of the bridge and the stationary road. She drove straight into it with absolutely no hesitation. And to make it even more absurd, the woman weaved past cars waiting to cross the bridge, just to break through the barricade and almost die. The wheels of her bicycle fell through the gap, the bike flipped over, and the woman vanished from view. Nearby people got out of their vehicles and ran to the edge of the bridge, hoping to help the woman, and thankfully they were able to pull her out of the gap before she was crushed to death by the rising bridge or dumped into the river, whichever came first. She was taken to the hospital with minor injuries to her face, but did survive. Number 8. Cyclist versus train. A man in Utah died in May of 2022 when he was hit by a front-runner train. According to Fox News, it happened in the small city of Murray while the man was riding his bicycle across the train tracks. It was about 7:30 at night, and the man, identified as 20-year-old Eric Lynch, was delivering a pizza on an e-bike. He approached the train tracks, saw that the barrier arm was down, indicating a train was coming, and so he waited for the train to pass. There was a northbound Union Pacific train coming, and he watched it go before proceeding. However, the arm indicating to stop and not cross the tracks was still down. He drove around it, not realizing a second train was coming from the other direction. He never waited for the barricade arm to go up. According to Utah Transit Authority spokesman Carl Arki, all the warning equipment was active. The arm was down, lights and bells were going off, and everything was working that indicated an incoming train. Still, Eric never saw that second train coming, and he pedaled onto the tracks and was hit full force by the speeding hunk of metal. Carl Arki made a statement following the tragic incident, urging the public to be more careful at train crossings. Even if it seems safe, never go around a barricade. It's there for a reason. Those flashing lights are a great indicator of imminent death should you choose to ignore the barricade. Number 7. Overlooking Manhattan. A man in Brooklyn fell to his death in the summer of 2012 while taking in the view of Manhattan. And it was all because he went around a safety barrier. He literally walked past a large sign that read, "Do not go beyond barricade," in capital letters. The sightseer ignored the safety warning, walked past the barricade, and for a split second enjoyed the skyline of Manhattan. Then he fell into the Hudson River and died. According to the victim's grieving father, it wasn't like his son at all, Artem Adziev, to take risks. The 26-year-old was a straight shooter and not someone who would ignore such an obvious warning. And yet, according to his father, Artem had been hanging out with a mysterious new friend named Misha. After the devastating accident, Misha vanished, apparently out of the country. But because there's no proof of any funny business, and Misha was already long gone by the time the cops showed up, nobody knows what really happened. It may have been an accident, or maybe Misha gave Artem a little push. Number 6. Reckless getaway driver. Terence Fowler was 20 years old in 2011 when he led police on a high-speed chase in a stolen vehicle. Fowler had stolen himself a red Mercedes C180 outside of a house in Cambridgeshire in the UK. The stolen car soon triggered a security system the British have, something called the Automatic Number Plate Recognition System. This system is linked through traffic cameras throughout the country, and it can track down a vehicle instantaneously. The cameras recognized the stolen plate number, alerted the police, and they showed up to arrest the thief. But the thief wasn't going to be arrested that easily. He refused to stop, the police gave chase, and they wound up hitting speeds of over 90 miles per hour, 145 kilometers per hour. Fowler was driving on the wrong side of the road, speeding through roundabouts and being extremely reckless. And then came the train. Up ahead in the distance were the flashing lights of a railroad crossing. The barricade arms came down, and Terence Fowler stepped on the gas. He flew straight through the barriers, missing the 120-ton, 108,862-kilogram passenger train by the skin of his teeth. He broke the barriers to pieces, narrowly avoided certain death, and the police had no choice but to stop. In this case, smashing through the barrier actually did pay off for Fowler, although only for a bit. The police tracked down the vehicle, finding it abandoned sometime later. Fowler's blood was all over the smashed windshield, and he was arrested soon after in the town of Bournemouth. He was charged with dangerous driving, criminal damage, obstructing an engine using a railway, and driving with no insurance. He was given 3.5 years in jail. Number 5. Live wires. In 2018, in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey, a man was burned alive in his car after he drove around a barricade and directly onto live electric wires. It wasn't a large barricade that this man drove around, but rather some traffic cones that had been placed on the road to warn motorists of the downed live wire. This thing literally had electricity sparking out of it. If someone had touched it, they would have been instantly fried. And in this case, the guy's car went completely up in flames. According to the police in Franklin Lakes, the second the vehicle touched the live wire, a spark went off, which resulted in a huge flame, and in seconds, the entire vehicle was engulfed. The victim was identified as Anthony Gonzalez, a 40-year-old man and father of 3 children. He had been on his way to his elderly father's home to shovel the driveway for him. A spokesman for the police said that, unfortunately, the department didn't have the personnel available to post an officer at this particular hazard. The area had just received 2 feet, 0.6 meters of snow, and there was chaos across the entire city. In the case of a downed wire, they simply block off the area and alert the power company. Anthony saw the barricade coming and thought he could simply drive around it. Instead of going to his father's house, he was burnt to a crisp. Number 4. Selfie on a bridge. A woman fell off the highest bridge in California in April of 2017. This woman, identified only as being from Sacramento, was walking across the Forest Hill Bridge on a Tuesday. The bridge is 730 feet, 223 meters tall, making it one of the highest in the entire country. The woman was with a couple of friends, and they were walking on the girders below the bridge when she attempted to take a selfie. She fell and landed 60 feet, 18 meters on a trail below. It was a miracle she hit a trail and didn't fall the full 730 feet, 223 meters to the water below, which would have been like jumping out of an airplane and landing on a concrete slab. According to one of the women's friends who was there, Paul Goncharuk, she had to be airlifted to a nearby hospital. The impact when she hit the ground knocked her unconscious, and she had several fractured bones that required surgery. The police say that taking pictures underneath the bridge is popular with social media posters and also wildly dangerous. It's really just lucky she was near the beginning of the bridge with a bit of ground left underneath to fall on. Number 3. Motorcyclist on the tracks. In Thailand in 2017, an elderly woman was run over by a train. This elderly woman drove her motorcycle around a lowered barrier and tried to cross a narrow set of railway tracks. That was when she got hit head-on by a speeding train. According to the Thai police, the incident went down in the rural Hat Yai district. Eyewitnesses saw the whole thing at about 10 o'clock in the morning. The barricades came down to prevent people on their motorcycles from driving through, but Wana Saufet, a vegetable vendor and 70 years old, deliberately ignored it. She went around the wide way, flanking the barrier and driving her motorcycle onto the track. Eyewitnesses screamed at her not to go. They shouted and ran to try and stop her, but she was absolutely determined to make that crossing. She was hit by the train, and it dragged her about 900 feet, 274 meters along the track before it finally came to a stop. If the elderly woman wasn't killed on impact, she was certainly killed by being dragged underneath the train's wheels for so long. Number 2. Off the beaten trail. At Yosemite National Park in 2019, a 21-year-old tourist died falling down a waterfall. His name was Lucian Miu, a Romanian citizen visiting the country. He slipped on some wet rocks, fell about 20 feet, 6 meters, near the Bride Vale Fall, and made an extremely rough landing. He was whisked to the hospital, but died shortly after his arrival. What's truly shocking is that in that week alone, he was the third person to get into an accident. The park officials released a statement on Instagram saying that all 3 individuals had left the trail. They hiked down to the viewing platform, which is underneath Bride Vale Fall. Then they climbed up a boulder, passed signs warning against going farther, and slipped on wet rocks and hurt themselves. But in those 2 instances, emergency responders were able to brave the rough terrain and rescue the wounded. In Lucian Miu's case, he went off the trail at the base of Lower Yosemite Fall. And because he plunged into Yosemite Creek, getting trapped underwater between some huge rocks, there was just no way he could escape. Number 1. The Boom Gate. Nobel Prize winner Professor Barry Marshall admitted in 2020 that he drove straight through a boom gate after getting upset with the attendants of the parking lot. Marshall was the one you might remember who drank a petri dish containing the bacteria Helicobacter pylori, his aim to prove the link between organisms and stomach ulcers. His research earned him the Nobel Prize in 2005. Nobel Prize or not, Barry Marshall had a meltdown in the parking lot not far from a building that had actually been named in his honor, the Marshall Center for Infectious Diseases Research and Training. He had a history with the gatekeepers at the parking lot, claiming that they had a habit of telling him the parking lot was full, even when it clearly wasn't. And because he had to drop something off at his rooms, he got out of his car, popped the boom gate out of its housing, put it down beside the gate, and drove inside. This allowed 2 other cars to follow him in without having to pay the fee. By the time Marshall came back out, the parking attendants were on full alert. They put the boom gate back into its housing and then refused to let him out of the parking lot. One of the attendants even got in front of his car and started banging on the hood, bending it and causing about $1,400 in damage. Feeling suddenly threatened and trapped, Marshall hit the gas and drove straight through the gate and out of the parking lot. It was all quite dramatic, but mostly because of Marshall's prestige as a world-renowned scientist. He was ordered to pay $470 in damage and was fined $750. Thanks for watching. Would you rather fall off a cliff or get hit by a train? Which do you think would give you a better chance at survival? Let us know in the comments, and be sure to hit subscribe if you haven't yet, and we'll see you again for another shocking video.